Welcome back to Resistance Chicks. We're your hosts, Leah and Michelle. Today's the 22nd of September, 2019. It's a Sunday. You know what Sunday means? We're going around the world, baby. We have a lot to talk about. I'm kind of excited.
Paris reaches a new level of carnage. Climate protesters,
right?
And the Black Bloc anarchists clash with the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vests, in France. Trying to break it up are the understandably trigger-happy coppers, tear gas bonanza. Meanwhile, Macron reckons he has the authority to lecture us about Brexit. So you have the Gilets jaunes and the climaters actually kind of fighting here. Very interesting. These people, if they're really helping the environment, haven't they? And Macron wants to say, hey, UK, you can't handle governing yourselves. Macron's country is literally out of control, and he wants to control the UK.
Leslie O'Connor says this is never reported in Britain. But why would it be? It's not going to be reported anywhere.
It doesn't happen if they don't report it.
Exactly.
You know, this is all like the left's fault. And I gotta tell you, the left has really pushed these people to the brink.
You know what's kind of disheartening for me though to see something like that is because like when you're in a situation and like that and your emotions are heightened and you're willing to literally almost put your life and your body on the line like that guy for what you believe, regardless of whether you're right or whether you're wrong, okay? And in a situation like this, it is for naught. It's not even like, you're not going to war, okay? Like a war, you know, fighting a war does affect things. And your message isn't even getting out there because nobody's allowed to talk about it.
Right.
So we live in this very strange society where you can have something incredible, life-changing happen to you. You could end up in the hospital. You could have a concussion. You could be, you know, your ears could be ruined for life. You could lose it. I don't know. And no one will know about it because of the censorship that we live under. It's a scary world that we are living in.
And that goes right into this article I have here. You guys know who he is. I don't, but John Humphreys, I guess, is a veteran from the BBC for 33 years. And I guess he's on his way out, or he's out. But let me get to this article here. He says that the BBC is Kremlin-style thought police, and they want to mold the UK into the liberal left's image.
Exactly.
John Humphreys, the veteran BBC journalist who helmed its flagship Today program for 33 years, exposed the publicly funded broadcaster as institutional liberal bias within days of his retirement. So he's not retired yet, but Mr. Humphreys expressed his relief at being free from the BBC thought police, which he claims has tried to mold the nation into its own liberal left image. Despite the broadcaster's notional legals requirement to remain balanced and impartial in memoirs that are being serialized by the Daily Mail. The 76-year-old Welshman revealed, and then we just see that the Welsh team seemed to have a little bit of a 75% Wales voted to leave, right? Revealed the BBC's great fear of the politically correct brigade and the most fashionable pressure groups, usually from the liberal left, the spiritual home of most bosses and staff, and how the disaster of the British people's vote to leave the European Union in 2016 against the advice of the left neoliberal establishment sent them reeling. The morning of the EU referendum was different. Leave had won, and this was not what the BBC had expected, nor what it wanted. No nods and smiles when the big bosses appeared. No attempt to pretend that this was anything other than a disaster. Their expressions were as grim as the look on the face of a football supporter when his team's star player misses the penalty that would have won them the cup.
It's more like this.
Yeah, Humphreys, though he voted Remain, though he voted Remain.
See?
In the European Union himself said the result exposed a fundamental flaw in the culture of the BBC, and that its bosses, almost to a man and woman, could simply not grasp how anyone could have put a cross in the lead box on the referendum ballot that day. He suggested that the public broadcaster was similarly out of touch on issues such as mass migration, and how the efforts of Robin Aiken, a senior BBC journalist, to put together a dossier highlighting the way the corporation had failed or fallen into the left-wing agenda, which was wholeheartedly and unashamedly pro-EU, were first met with silence and then the instruction of blank off. There is, I believe, a groupthink mentality, an implicit BBC attitude to what makes news. Humphreys opined. Obviously, you're talking about the Gillette Jaunes not making news there.
Yeah.
And obviously, such anti-Trump coverage is not even funny. Totally anti-Salvini. Totally anti-Hungary and Poland. Calling them white supremacists and Nazis. Suggesting its institutional liberal bias was not so much a product of conspiracy as of its tendency to recruit middle-class liberal arts graduates, a disproportionately large portion of whom who have been to private schools trained by left-wing academics. And that is true. This may explain why the BBC sometimes fails so badly to spot any change in the nation's mood in hugely important areas. Immigration was one of them. Humphreys is not the first BBC veteran to highlight the corporation's bias, although for his part, Humphreys believes it is still a force for good overall. With Peter Sysons, who presented the BBC 9 o'clock news and the BBC 10 o'clock news for a decade, having alleged that a left-wing mindset was at the core of the BBC in its very DNA in 2011. By far the most popular and widely read newspapers at the BBC are The Guardian and The Independent, the two major left-wing Europhile outlets. Producers refer to them routinely for the line to take on running their own stories and for inspiration on what items to cover. In the latter stages of my career, I lost count of the number of times I asked a producer for a brief on a story only to be handed a copy of The Guardian and said, it's all in there.
Wow. So for those of you that are not living in the UK, and some of this may sound a little bit, you're not quite understanding it, you're thinking the BBC is the equivalent to CNN. Well, you would be right and you would be wrong, because CNN is not government propaganda. It is, but it isn't. It's not funded. Taxpayers are not paying for CNN. And so Britt Bozza says the BBC's license is given to them because the BBC Constitution and license has to be impartial by law, yet the government still allows them a license even though they are breaking the law now. They have to, by law, be impartial. And it used to be all news was by and large impartial. They would present the facts and let the reader decide. That's what it is to be a news reporter and not a news commentator. Now, we give our news commentary, okay? I wouldn't exactly call us news reporters most of the time. I think sometimes we are, but by and large, I think we do news commentary. There's opinion pieces, okay? You can still be a journalist, but most people want to go to the mainstream news because they don't want to be fed what they should believe. They just want to be given the facts and allowed as a full-grown adult to make their own decision. So that's why the BBC is so corrupt, because these people in the UK are forced to pay for this thing. Like, you think you pay for cable, they have to pay for the BBC. Like a tax. It's a tax. They have to pay for it.
They've arrested people because they didn't pay it.
Exactly. It's ridiculous. Could you imagine if you had to pay, if you owned a television, if you had to pay to have CNN come into your house? I own a television and now I have to pay for CNN propaganda. Like, you have to. It's not even a choice. So that's why it's so corrupt.
So this is a little clip here. Did you hear Nigel talk about Emily Thornberry? That's her right there with the blue shirt and these little European Union stars saying, we want a people's vote.
Now! What do we want? A people's vote! When do we want it? Now!
Trust the people. Now. The people voted once, and you've betrayed their trust by asking for another vote. That's not the way that voting actually works, okay? So let's say from, let's go back to 2008.
Yeah.
Our grandma was still alive, and she would have died if she had known that Barack Obama was elected as president. So I think the Lord took her that year in May on purpose. But in 2008, Barack Obama was elected president of the United States. Now imagine, and this was in November, imagine if in December or even in January, right before the inauguration, all of the Republicans stood up and said, well, we really need to trust the voice of the people, so we need to have them vote again. Because I think between November and January, people have changed their minds. And so I think that we need to have another vote on who should be president. And we would start protesting and holding banners and signs saying, trust the people, trust the people. They need to vote again to tell us what they really think, because we believe that their minds have changed. And so don't you think that's the way that democracy should work?
It's a one step away from just taking away your vote
Ridiculous.
altogether.
I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm glad that you guys were able to be here with us today. Thank you for joining us for our European and UK news. As always, we go live every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and every Sunday at 1 p.m. roughly Eastern Standard Time. Like today we were late, but fashionably so. If you want to send us your letters, you can. P.O. Box 107, Milford, Ohio 45150. If you do send us letters, we will read them on air. So, unless otherwise noted, we love you. God loves you. God bless. Remember, it's not just a conspiracy theory if it's actually the truth. Come back tonight, 7 p.m., 7:30-ish Eastern Standard Time. I will be here and we're going to stream Eric Mathis' sermon. You do not want to miss this. I'm really, really excited about it. So, we love you guys.
We love you. God loves you. Thanks for being here, guys.
Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday.
I was cold, all alone. No place for home every day. So afraid, but you called my name.